Hello, and welcome to the Mainly Mozart podcast. My name is Garrett Harris, and I'm your host. This is episode number 3. I'm going to call this the New York Diaries. It was a warm autumn day on the island of Manhattan. I was on my way to meet with the flutist, Jeffrey Kaner. Jeff is the principal flutist for the Mainly Mozart Festival and the Philadelphia Orchestra. He was in town with the Philadelphia Orchestra to perform in the opening concert of Carnegie Hall's season under the baton of Yannick Nézet-Séguin. And thanks to Jeff's coaching, I just nailed the pronunciation of Yannick Nézet-Séguin. We were meeting at his husband's restaurant, etc., on 44th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue. Since I'm not a New Yorker, I actually enjoy a walk through Times Square. I got off the B train at 42nd Street and walked the few blocks over to etc. At the start of our conversation here, I'm owning up to the fact that I'm a singer and not a musician. So I do have something of a musical background, a singer's background.
Not a musician.
Not a musician, yes. Singer's background.
Okay.
I mean, I can count. To a certain degree.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's what we want to learn or hear from you is just a little bit about the flute. We got a nice dose last festival with the Debussy, the Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun. I assume that was you playing.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
There were a lot of flute excerpts last year. Things that one wouldn't typically expect to find at a Mozart festival. Prokofiev, Classical Symphony, and the Mendelssohn Midsummer Night's Dream, and the Afternoon of a Faun. Those are all big flute excerpts that are almost always asked at auditions.
Oh, nice.
So it was fun to think, oh yeah, I'm going to play the Mozart Festival and have to play all these flute audition excerpts.
So what's your approach? I mean, you don't have to audition, I assume, much anymore. But
no, goodness no.
Yeah. But when you were auditioning, what was your experience? I mean, were you one who had to go take a moment to puke in the bathroom, or you're kind of like, I can take this test?
You know, auditioning is a horrible thing to have to go through. For everyone, not just for the people auditioning, but it's no pleasant task for the people that are listening either. And I haven't had to play an audition in, 40 years. But when I was taking auditions, I actually took very few of them, and I was lucky enough to be successful at most of them. And everyone has a different way of preparing for those things. Mostly intense preparation for me was the key. Just being so prepared that I felt that I could perform under any circumstance, because the audition environment is something so unlike any other that you can't really practice it.
Right. And
auditions are something I've always felt are not something that you get better at the more you do them. You know, I think it's kind of the opposite. The more you do them, if you're not successful, the worse they get, the harder they get, the more the pressure builds, and that can make it intolerable.
Right.
So the auditions are something that I would avoid at all costs. You know, I know some people promote taking every possible audition because there are so few jobs available.
Right, and it does make you feel like you're doing something.
It does, but I've always told my students that I think it's wiser to choose carefully the auditions that you are really serious about, that you really feel you're prepared for, and then to go for them, with as much intensity as possible. And I think that the chances are better if you focus more in that way and take it more seriously,
right,
than just, this is another learning experience. It's
right.
These things are not meant to be learning experiences. They're meant to be, deadly serious. So that's a horrible topic, auditions.
Isn't it? Like what? They could change. right?
I don't know
Couldn't
how. I don't. They could change your life.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know how it would be possible to change the process to make them any better or easier.
Right, because there's so much writing on it for everyone.
Well,
the auditors want someone good.
Of course.
They want you to come in and be incredible.
Of course. And that's a key thing to remember for the person who's taking the audition, is that the people behind the screen, I mean, typically they're behind a screen these days, they want to hear you at your best. So they're listening for all the really good things. They're not typically listening for the bad things. So I think there's a misconception out there that you have to be perfect at an audition. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to have the ability to be perfect.
Okay.
And the committee can always tell when something goes wrong just by accident, or when something goes wrong because you're not prepared. And the second is unforgivable. But
that's good.
The first is easily excusable.
That's fantastic to know.
Mistakes happen to everyone.
They can tell
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's without question. We all know what it's like when something doesn't go exactly the way you plan it, and how you deal with that, and how you get through it is part of the audition. In fact, if you can miss something and not have it affect you, that's good to know. Right.
Yeah. If things don't go right, are you going to collapse, or do you focus?
Yeah.
I guess are the two poles.
Yeah.
People probably fall anywhere in between.
Yeah. So I wouldn't counsel deliberately making a mistake in order to recover.
Yeah. Look at my recovery skills.
I think the point is that you focus and you keep going no matter what, and you don't let any little thing screw up your mindset.
Right. Now, how do you have I assume that there's a mindset for a performance as well. Do you have a process or anything, or kind of a ritual that you go through before a performance? Or does it depend kind of on the performance, the material?
Well, certainly it depends on the material and the sort of role I'm going to play in the performance. If it's a concerto, I'll certainly prepare in a different way than I would if it's just a regular orchestra concert. And depending on what the parts are that I have to play. But I typically don't do anything really unusual before a concert. I do eat something, otherwise, I'm not going to get through the whole concert.
Yeah.
I don't do any. I know people do little things like eat a banana for the potassium.
You don't overthink
these things may
that.
help,
Yeah,
but
right.
I don't do them. I don't know.
Yeah.
And for performing, I always try to put myself in the mindset of performing, whether it's a rehearsal or a concert, and putting the part out there as though it were a performance, whether it's a rehearsal or not.
Right. Yeah. Why the flute? I mean, I know it. I believe. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. It is the instrument of kings, because Frederick the Great was a famous. Is it flutist or flautist?
Flutition.
Flutition. Okay. I like that.
I'm asked that so often. If you.
It's just whatever.
It's a flutist for me seems a little bit more
down to earth.
Down to earth.
Yeah.
Okay. Why the flute? I remember that I specifically wanted the flute, and I sort of engineered my selection to be sure that I would get the flute, but I don't remember why.
Okay, what do you mean by engineered your selection?
Well,
is this a school?
Yes,
okay.
In high school, grade 7, in Montreal, high school started in grade 7, and the first day of band class, the teacher asked us to list 3 instruments in the order of preference on a piece of paper. And I wrote flute, and after that I think I wrote oboe and clarinet. I don't clearly remember because I wasn't interested in them. And I waited until everyone else had left the room so I could put my paper on top, so that I would be sure to get it.
There was just something about...
Yes, I just don't. I simply don't remember why.
But woodwinds apparently, because
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
Huh, yeah. That's really interesting. It just Almost like it was not a choice.
It seems like that now. Yeah.
Did you ever think about quitting?
No.
Never.
All musicians go through periods of self-doubt and that sort of thing, but once I started, it never really occurred to me to do anything else.
Okay.
So that's since grade 7, basically, I've focused on the flute.
Right.
And there were other things that I had been interested in before. I remember as a very young child being interested in things that probably most kids are, being a veterinarian and that sort of thing. But once I started playing, that's what I did. I used to practice a lot, and I loved playing. I loved playing with other people, and it just didn't occur to me to do anything else. I think maybe one of the reasons I realized that it was worth my while to be as interested in the flute as I was that when I was still in high school, we had a new band teacher come in, and she realized that I could play the flute better than she could, so she asked me for lessons.
Wow.
So that was a bit of a claim to fame of mine when I was in school, was I gave the band teacher lessons.
What a great move by the band teacher, too.
Yeah,
really.
It was. She was, I think, a great lady, and she recognized that maybe I could help her.
Well, and it helps you.
And it helped me.
Yeah.
It was a tremendous boost for me, certainly. And I've been interested in teaching ever since.
So you teach pretty consistently then, or is it more master class type settings?
Well, I teach at the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia and at the Juilliard School in New York, and also at Lynn University in Florida. So I'm traveling back and forth between these places a lot, and I spend a lot of time with students on an individual basis, which for me is really a lot of fun.
Have you asked any of them to give you lessons?
I haven't, but I learn a lot from them.
Okay.
There is nothing that teaches oneself better than having to explain to someone else what one is doing or how one does something. I mean, to actually have to think about what you're doing is extremely useful.
Mm-hmm. Mozart. We should talk about Mozart.
Yeah, Mozart hated the flute, is what people think.
Okay.
And
big fan of the clarinet?
Clearly.
Yeah.
I don't believe at all that Mozart hated the flute. I think this all stems from a letter that he wrote to his father complaining about a commission that he'd had from this Dutch flute player who didn't pay him, and I think there was a tremendous frustration with the whole thing.
Right.
And he said something like, "Ugh, I hate this," but he wrote so beautifully for the flute, and he used it a lot, that I don't think it's possible that he actually.
Well, it's in the title of one of his operas, too. It's magical, apparently.
It is. But I mean, throughout all of his works, the flute is used beautifully and almost always as a solo instrument. So, for example, there are so many pieces, the piano concertos, the symphonies, where he uses only one flute, but he uses double other woodwind instruments, double oboes, clarinets, bassoons, depending, but only one flute. And that is because the flute is used really only as a solo instrument and never as sort of the harmony.
So it's not really doing the counter melodies. It's there's such a thing in Mozart, right?
It is sometimes, because sometimes the flute will be playing a second oboe, so to speak, we'll play a secondary part to one of the other instruments. But it's never used really as just the color of flute harmony within the texture of the
like
orchestration.
Mendelssohn would do.
as Mendelssohn did it, and Mendelssohn famously did it in the Italian Symphony in the third.
I was going to bring up the Italian Symphony.
So that's where that's really the first time that you really hear the flutes being used in that way.
Yeah, the opening is so thrilling.
Yeah.
Of it too, as well. I mean, the woodwinds are like kind of driving. I mean, the strings do their thing, but that underneath is so. I've always loved it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the famous chords in the Midsummer Night's Dream that we heard this last festival.
Yeah.
Which I always expect to hear Scheherazade start.
Yeah.
After that.
Well, those are notoriously difficult sets of chords in the Mendelssohn and in the Scheherazade, just for the intonation within the orchestra and everything.
Yeah, I know where that happens now and then for opera orchestras, just because I've been in it. The cellos in the third act of Tosca are never, ever in tune. I don't know why. It doesn't matter where it's being done. But what, besides those chords in Mendelssohn, where did the, I guess within the section, the woodwind section, I would guess the slow movement of Beethoven's Ninth seems to always be a challenge to get that to be seamless. But where the pitfalls, I guess, in kind of the repertoire that people would know?
I'm
not trying to give you a quiz. Wrong.
Yeah, what's hard? Is
right.
that what you're saying?
Yeah. Or what should we as audience members really appreciate? Because I wouldn't necessarily know as a casual listener that those chords in the Mendelssohn are something, when they come off correctly, that's something spectacular.
You know, I have to say, in all honesty, nothing is easy. And our goal is to make sure that nobody in the audience thinks that anything sounds less than easy.
Right.
You know, you don't want people to be thinking about that. About the technical issues that somebody might be having. It's you want them to be listening to the music. So, you know, there are styles of playing. There's a style that can make a piece sound unbelievably hard and virtuosic because of that. And then there's another style of playing with the same piece where it makes it sound unbelievably easy. And that's what makes it virtuosic.
Right.
I mean, for me, I'm sort of that second school. I love when something that I happen to know is fiendishly difficult sounds effortless.
Right. So you're not a concert pianist?
Well, no, but it's
because they all have their shtick, right?
Some
are more believable than others.
Yes, and some can make it sound like it's just effortless.
Right.
You know, and that's really awesome.
Yeah. And then, how about this journey through Mozart's life that the festival is doing? I think we're coming up to the third year.
Yeah, I think it's a great way of approaching setting up programming for the orchestra. I think it's a wonderful way of doing that, and it's, I think, great for the audience to sort of work their way through it in that way too.
Right.
Of course, it's not necessary to have heard the first 3 seasons in order to appreciate the 4th season. That's not at all the issue. But I think for the audience, it's always great to have something to be thinking about, even with someone like Mozart, which is so easy to listen to. I mean, I think this is even more important with modern music, where people may be sort of mystified as to what's happening. It's so useful for them to hear something about the piece beforehand, which is why conductors talking to the audience before playing a piece is so fashionable and popular with good reason. And I think it's good. Even just to point out, you know, listen for this, or this is what he was thinking when he wrote this, or, you know, anything of that nature, I think is really useful for the audience. So being able to understand what's going on in Mozart's life when this was happening or that sort of thing can be, I think, very interesting and possibly even poignant, because Mozart is famously known for writing unbelievably cheerful music in the worst of times.
Right, so that was his...
It's, I mean, the most incredible, uplifting and joyous music when his life was falling down around him. It's remarkable.
So not like Rachmaninoff.
Well,
because I like, you know, there's the famous, I think it was Stravinsky quote that Rachmaninoff was a 6.5-foot frown. And then I was like, well, maybe Mozart was like a 5.5-foot giggle.
Yeah, maybe. It's so hard to separate what we know from the movie.
True. Yeah.
Mozart, he looked just like Tom Hulce, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, Rachmaninoff, I wouldn't say wrote cheerful music.
Right.
So yes, in that regard. But he did write exultant music at times. So I mean, there's that too. But yeah, certainly the character is something completely different from Mozart.
Right. Yeah, it's you bring up. I'm going to push back just a little bit because I don't want to make this about me and my ideas. But with the modern music, I think the conceptual approach excludes such a huge percentage of the population, because if you don't get the concept, there's almost no hope for you except to say something such as, I like when they challenge us. And it's not just music. I think conceptual art in general has become almost all that we get. And so the idea of beauty is not out the window, but it's not given the pride of place that it was in
I
the
don't
past.
know that I agree with that.
Sure.
In music, I think that was more valid perhaps some years ago.
Okay.
In the second half of the 20th century, there was a lot of music written that was extremely intellectual, and people didn't find much emotion to it, and still have not. And I think that's important, the idea that they still haven't, because a lot of music is, when it's initially heard, is thought of as being just totally wacky and unemotional, and then the more we become used to it and the more we like the Rite of Spring is, you know, a famous example. Exactly. It was, you know, so radical and so astounding when it happened. Now, to me, it's so romantic. My God, it's just, you know, not in the sense of being romantic music in quotation marks, but the whole idea of the thing, and the music is so visceral and so...
Well, sure, yeah, that's some of the hallmarks of romanticism are strong emotions and nature, and that's why it's all about nature.
So I don't think anyone listens to that piece anymore and thinks, oh my God, this is so...
avant-garde.
Avant-garde, yeah. On the other hand, you can actually analyze this piece and think, my God, this is still avant-garde. You know?
Sure.
And you can do the same thing with going earlier, I mean, with Beethoven. You know, it's like the opening of the Third Symphony of Beethoven. It's avant-garde, and if you remember that and play it that way, it could be something completely different than what you might be used to. But that's the sort of thing that can be useful to talk to an audience about a little bit.
Right.
You know, so that they can appreciate that that all music was, you know, new
at one point,
at some point.
Yeah.
And
although in the past, and this is something Michael and I touched on briefly, composers weren't afraid of being derivative. I mean, they would just, Mozart himself would just kind of look at what Michael Haydn was doing, and then later, Papa Bach. And I mean, Michael Haydn's Requiem isn't too far removed from Mozart's Requiem when you listen to them back to back. And it feels like there's a fear of being considered derivative. Maybe that is going away, because I agree with you that the emotional content is coming back into a lot of new music, absolutely. But there's almost this feeling that it all has to be the Rite of Spring, or the Tristan chord, or things where music history pivots on the piece.
Well, I think that composers these days probably do not borrow in the same way that they used to.
Right.
I mean, even up to Rachmaninoff, doing the Paganini variations. Yeah, I can't think of anything recent where a composer has done that. I'm sure there is somewhere, but it's not coming to mind.
Sure. Well, Great Scott, an opera by Jake Hagee, is about an opera singer who discovers a lost bel canto opera, and he writes all this bel canto style chorus music and arias, which was, a lot of people thought it wasn't all that, but my response to it was, wow. It's like, here's someone who wrote the kind of music that they love. You could feel the love and the truth in it, to me. And that's the only example I can think of myself.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know whether.
But he did it. It was a clever trick, isn't it? Like because it's part of the story, so he has to write it this way.
Yeah, that is very clever. But it's the same like with architecture, for example. Architects are, they don't want to do anything that looks like what somebody else might do.
Right.
Which is understandable, of course. I think that's one of the issues about concert halls. Building new concert halls and getting good acoustics. It's like we always go back to the old shoebox of Vienna Philharmonic and Boston Symphony Hall.
And I think the Concertgebouw.
Concertgebouw is not such a shoebox. But I mean, it's a much bigger hall than those others. But of course, these halls are much smaller than the ones we typically build, especially in America, where the halls are so big.
Right.
And I think there has to be such an intense design effort to make it more than just a concert hall, but a statement.
Right.
Like the Disney Hall that Gary did in Los Angeles, which is a fantastic building and complex, and luckily I think has good acoustics also. But often that gets sacrificed for the design. And that's unfortunate. Yeah.
It looked to me, just from what I've seen, that Montreal's new hall is kind of a modern shoebox. Like, it's long and narrow.
Yes.
Well, I don't know any specifics. It was just something that kind of...
Yeah, by all accounts, it's a very good hall.
Right.
How's
the Balboa in San Diego?
The Balboa is...
Because it's a movie theater.
It's a converted movie theater, so it has that sort of nostalgia, sentimental thing about it. That hall is very interesting because it doesn't feel great to play in, but I think it actually sounds better than it feels.
It sounds pretty good. Yeah.
And when I've gone out and listened, I'm always surprised because it doesn't, from the stage, it doesn't seem like it would sound like that out there.
Right, and I'm guessing the stage is just pretty soft.
Yeah, I mean, it feels dead and not very blooming, but out in the hall, it actually sounds much better.
Yeah.
Yes, it's always a surprise to me.
How long have you been coming to Mainly Mozart?
5, 6 years.
Okay. Yeah, a few years. Yeah.
I'll have to actually look that up.
I'll tell a story, just so you don't feel. I understand what's going on a little bit. I asked a very famous musician. I was given two questions on this group phone call. So they toured China, and I asked him, what was the experience like And he's like, I don't remember anything. And the point of it being that he has so much in his performance life. Like he'd probably done 100 performances since then.
Yeah, no, I understand that totally.
Yeah.
It's, especially on a tour, you know, you're
Right.
traveling, you're playing in different concerts, and people say, oh, how was that hall in such and such a city?
Right.
You know, unless there was something really extraordinary about it to make it stand out, I don't remember. Some people do,
Right.
but I don't.
Yeah.
I'll get them confused. It's like
Yeah.
when I go on long flights, you know, transoceanic flights, I'll watch 5 or 6 or 7 movies in a row, and afterward, if I try to remember which movies I've watched, I can't, and I'll start imagining a plot that happened that is a composite of several of the movies, and it's
Right.
like I have no.
There's like an existential thing going on there, really. Like, I think we're here to experience these things, not remember them.
Yeah, well,
I mean, we have memories. That's a happy legacy effect, maybe.
well, you know, that's like live concerts as opposed to recordings. I mean, you should go to a live concert because it's what you feel right then, right there.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
It's what makes classical music, opera, live theater. It's strength.
Yeah.
And I think the organizations that play to that strength and promote that strength and explain that strength and help people experience that are the ones that are going to be successful. I went to the Met for La Boheme, and it's an old Zeffirelli. It looks like Pirates of the Caribbean in a movie. And some people like that. The third act is behind a scrim, and it looks like a movie screen. But live theater can never be the movies.
Yeah.
It's a different experience because live theater and music, concert music, is the emotions in the room with you.
Yeah.
If someone gets in a fight, an argument on stage, you get that uncomfortable feeling that you would get at dinner if the couple next to you starts fighting. Like, that's you can get that in the movies, certainly, to a certain degree, but being in the room with it is different. It's like, what is that in a concert when it's sold out and everyone's excited to be there? There's something in the room.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And that's what we're shooting for with the Mainly Mozart Festival, is to amp that up just even more so we can have those peak experiences.
Yeah,
and then maybe not
great.
remember them. Who cares? Because.
Well, I mean, you know, you remember, even if you remember, oh, I had a wonderful time.
Right.
I mean, you don't have to remember who played or what they played. You just remember that it was a great night out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like going to a restaurant, too. I mean, you eat the meal and you enjoy it, and then it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. Seinfeld just had a good bit on that on his Netflix special. Like, don't ruin your appetite. He's like, I've got unlimited appetites. It's like, there's another one coming right behind it. And for you as a performer, I guess it's, you know, the next performance is always coming.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I don't think we don't play for the audience. We play for ourselves, and we hope the audience enjoys it.
Right.
And you know, intellectually, I think we know that our responsibility is to play for the audience what we think the composer means by what he writes on the paper. But it's really for ourselves that we're doing it to. You know, we have to please. We're trying to please ourselves.
Yeah. It's not selfish, what you're saying. I mean, the hours that the orchestra has put in practice time is almost like public service. Because the technique then allows the audience access to what the composer. You know,
it's so important, especially these days. This seems like these times are so fraught with anxiety and agitation and all sorts of unpleasant circumstances going on. that people have somewhere to go to be able to forget all of that and to, just put that away and not have to think about that for a little while. And that's what we provide.
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot more important than a lot of endeavors which, if you were going to rank them by salary, rank a lot higher.
Yes, yes. An Instagram influencer who makes,
It seems that societies are remembered not for the people who made a lot of money,
right?
Unless they're only remembered, and if they spent that money in artistic pursuits,
Absolutely.
Supporting arts organizations or supporting libraries or supporting things of that nature. Otherwise, these people will never be remembered. Who
were the Hofners?
Yeah.
We only know that name because of the Hofner Serenade and the Hofner Symphony.
Well, Carnegie, if he didn't endow all those libraries and build a hall in New York, I don't think anyone would know of the name. But I think this is one of the huge ills of society today, is that people think that everything should be measurable and quantifiable, and everything should be run as a business. For me, this is just absurd.
Right.
An arts organization is not a business. Healthcare is, for me, not a business.
Right.
Education is not a business.
Yeah.
These are. It's just a twisted sense of a twisted way of looking at society and the function of these various elements within society. It's like, oh my God, where are we going?
Yeah. The numbers say this. Well, the numbers work great for a lot of things. Because we're in this situation, we need those people who aren't going to be remembered by history, which is pretty much all of us, but to make the switch of mentality that this is what has appealed to people for generations and will continue to appeal to people for generations. And maybe I'm willing to sacrifice something of my material experience here in order to ensure that continues. So give until it hurts, folks.
Or even give as much so that you don't even feel it, and you probably will do just fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like
Yeah, there are a certain demographic that can give quite a bit without changing their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think they do, and are happy to.
Many do, but many don't even think of it.
Right. Like, what can we do to support the festival more, the musicians?
I can say that, the orchestra for this festival is an extraordinary group. There are really exceptional musicians that go and do this, and the reasons that we do it do not involve the money that we get paid to do it, because that is not at all on the radar. It's the chance to play such wonderful music with such great colleagues in a beautiful setting for people that really appreciate it.
There's some kind of communication happening across the sections that, because the technical ability is so very high, I guess there's a freedom to really just experience each other and the music and the setting.
Yeah. People are relaxed and are enjoying themselves.
Yeah. How dare they?
That's what we're supposed to do. That's the way it's supposed to be all the time. If only it were.
Oh, one more thing. Nézet-Séguin. Is that right? Nézet-Séguin?
Nézet-Séguin.
Séguin, okay. But the first three are the same sound. They just look different. Nézet-Séguin.
Nézet-Séguin.
Séguin, all right. For those who don't know, that's the... Is he the music director or the principal conductor?
Music director of the Philadelphia Orchestra and of the Metropolitan Opera now.
Right. And he's going to be leading you in a concert this evening at Carnegie Hall.
Yes, it's opening night at Carnegie Hall tonight, and we're doing Bernstein, a lot of Bernstein music, because this
Everyone
is the
is,
centenary
right.
for him, so his music is coming up all over the place. And Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue, with Chick Corea and Lang Lang playing piano. And
Who's playing what? Is Chick Corea playing the Rhapsody?
they're both playing it.
Oh, they're both playing it?
Yeah, it's a 2-piano version.
Oh, so the orchestra's not going to play?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's the original Ferdy Grofey arrangement of Rhapsody in Blue orchestration, and the piano part is split between the two of them. So
Okay.
We haven't rehearsed it yet, so I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen.
It's tonight.
Yes, I'm about to go to a rehearsal.
Okay. You guys are good.
Yeah, we'll just rehearse it beforehand, and then we'll
Right.
play it.
Yeah, Grofey, what an unknown master. I mean, he did all of Gershwin's orchestrations, I think, or most of them.
Yeah,
Not the
I
piano
think-
concerto. Gershwin did that himself. But I love the Grand Canyon Suite. I think it's fun.
Okay.
The little donkeys walking down the trail.
I think I'll just stay out.
Yeah, yeah. You're not required to love Grofey the way I do.